The one and only. I see her in the big chair in the Trustmark studio, Angela Cockerham. Good morning, ma'am. How are you?
Good morning, Paul Gallo. How are you?
I'm doing good. Here, I got the story for you here. Marijuana is legal in Illinois, but driving around with more than 80 pounds of the drug is not legal. You cannot do that. Police in Marion, Illinois, said officers stopped a man for allegedly speeding in a construction zone. Early yesterday morning, found 83 pounds of pot in his car, 30 bottles of THC syrup, 40 vape pens. He was taken to the Williamson County Jail pending a court hearing. Illinois state law only allows residents to possess 30 grams. 83 pounds is a little over 30 grams. People from outside the state are only allowed to carry half that much than 30 grams. And the reason I read this is because they say 44-year-old William Davis is the guy who was arrested and in Marion, Illinois, and he is from Lexington, Mississippi. Faces several charges, including drug trafficking. So 44-year-old William Davis of Lexington is now a resident for a while in Marion, Illinois. So I have no idea where that 83 pounds was going, whether he was traveling south or north, but it is an interesting story. Have you recouped yet from the session?
I have not, but it's okay. We ended the session early on a Saturday morning and then went that Saturday after I got a few hours of rest. I had to practice a little bit of law, Paul.
Yeah.
So, but it's been an exciting session. I mean, I don't lament having recouped. I mean, that just goes with it. So,
was it what you expected or a little bit busier than you expected?
It was not, but let me tell you this. I usually don't go in with any kind of expectation. I try to keep an open mind when we start on the first day. It had everything for me. I was trying to think of a way to describe it. It had a little bit of everything. It was definitely excitement. I think we got a lot of good things accomplished for the state, for colleagues, for your individual districts. So actually for an election year, it actually turned out a lot better than I anticipated.
I think we all went into this thing in the summer of last year saying, well, the year before, man, what else is left to do? And then slowly but surely, as the gavel was about to hit in January, it picked up a little bit of steam and said, okay, there's some things that are going to happen. And we didn't get any tax reforms that the House wanted, and the Senate kind of put a halt to that one. And in a way, was it a good idea or a bad idea not to move forward? We haven't seen how these other things that were implemented as far as the first cuts are what kind of consequences or ramifications they're going to have. But your thoughts on that?
Well, I will say that, eliminating taxes was a big initiative for the speaker. Last year in the 2022 session, we made great strides in getting that done. And so I don't fault the speaker at all for really pushing and advocating. It was something that he really believed in. I know the governor has talked about it as well. But that happens sometimes where both sides, and when I mean both sides, both chambers can't agree. We can see how the reforms that we passed this past year in 2022, how that plays out. And there's always time and room to go back and get that done in later years.
When you look at the 12 years that Philip Gunn's been Speaker, your thoughts on this one since it's over for him as far as Speaker is concerned?
Over for him as far as Speaker is concerned, just for a snippet is what I hope is going to happen. He's a great friend. And I consider Mrs. Gunn to be a great friend as well. Yeah. He and I were really good friends before he even became Speaker, and I think he has a lasting impact on the state of Mississippi and also in terms of the members of the House as well. And When I think about the number of times whether there's been a big issue that has occurred here in the state of Mississippi over the last 12 years, you're not going to be able to talk about the reforms without mentioning Speaker Gunn's name in that conversation.
Absolutely. From the flag to numerous other things. You're absolutely right. I do remember in the final 3 or 4 years, or certainly the last 4 years of Billy McCoy's term, in the interviews that we had on the air with just rank and file sitting in the back, Philip Gunn, as one of the Republicans who were, you'd have to just find out who they were because they didn't have any chairmanships. You looked at Philip and said, hey, this guy has the material to be a good speaker, stubborn, but his morals were there, his steadfastness was there, and his temperament was there. And I think all those things played into the 12 years that he served.
All of those things, and also great compassion, too, for the state of Mississippi as a whole and also for the membership. I think anytime you're in a great leadership position as speaker, and you have 121 members that you have to work with who have their own ideas and their own goals, that takes a lot, as you just mentioned, temperament, et cetera. And over those 12 years, you got a chance to really see Speaker Gunn as he transcended from the first session all the way up to, the last day of the session when his family's there. And I remember probably the last week he stood up of session and he said, listen, if I have offended any of you, or if, I don't want to leave without there being some reconciliation between us. I don't want to leave with there being any hard feelings. So it was the policy, but it was also the relationship as well with the members of the House and the Senate, and I think that speaks very big of him.
If he had any lacking or has any lacking, it would probably be in a very dry sense of humor. We'll leave it there. I hope he didn't hear that. Let me move. By the way, also, it looks like Jason White is the lead on this one. I'm not sure if they're going to be a speaker fight or not or race in the next one. But your thoughts?
Well, that appears to be the case. I've had the opportunity to work with Jason as well, and you're right. It appears that it's the Speaker Pro Tem. And so we'll see as the election takes place in November and we come back in January. But you're right on that.
You had a couple of bills signed, was it yesterday, from the governor that the law of the land because of you, and you pinned these?
I did. I authored them, but I also had a lot of support, from my Judiciary Committee, which is the best committee in the House, I must say. And the members of that committee have played an integral part in that legislation as well, as also all of the House colleagues. So let me tell you, you remember when I was here earlier in this session, we talked about that sexual assault evidence rape kit, and we talked about it last year when I was here as well, how significant that piece of legislation is, and so the governor signed that one, and also
let's talk. There was HB 485. Let's talk about that for a little, because a lot of times it just takes a couple of years for these things to really. It's very hard to get it done the first year. Sometimes it takes 2 or 3 years. Sexual assault evidence kit regulated, and it's signed by the governor. For people who don't know what that is, just explain it a little bit.
So what this bill does is, as unfortunately, if you have someone who is the victim of a sexual assault, then there is evidence that's collected. And what 485 does is that it provides a procedure for the collection of that evidence, and it prescribes, if there's a medical facility who is actually taking this evidence, how long it's supposed to be refrigerated, how the law enforcement transports this evidence, and how long the crime lab has to actually test it.
And that is July 1st, the enactment date?
July 1st, the enactment date. You're absolutely correct.
We'll talk about HB 1216, circuit judges and chancellors increase. We'll talk about what that increase is. It's another one of the bills from Angela Cockerham, and a couple of other things, too, I want to bring up to you in the quick segment we have coming up next. So hold on for that. Listen, I'm hitting you cold with this one, but it's a little bit. It came up yesterday from your counterpart over in the Senate, Angela Hill, and I'm reading from an archive story in 2005. A teen accused of killing his own family is behind bars, serving 2 consecutive sentences. More than 2 years after the double murder were committed, the victim's family said they can finally start to heal. 19-year-old James Williams III will spend 60 years in prison and is not eligible for parole. He's guilty of killing his father, James Williams Jr., and his stepmother, Cindy Williams, December 28th of 2002. Mr. Williams was a postal worker. His wife was working, 47 years old, a Catholic Charities worker, found shot to death January 6, 2003. Long story short, and I won't read the rest of this, but the parole board apparently yesterday, or day before yesterday, granted him a parole, and he's only been in prison since 2005. I think it's a total of 18 years, so about 9 years per murder. And the parole board basically stated, and I have the letter here, it says, please be advised that on April the 12th, the parole board granted the offender a parole. We understand this decision may come as a disappointment to you. I guess this is to the family. However, the board believes that James Williams is able and willing to be a law-abiding citizen, et cetera, et cetera. Was there anything brought up this year that added more oversight to the parole board?
Not to my knowledge, Paul. I know that we did increase some sentences. This was something that Lieutenant Governor wanted to do on the Senate side, that increased sentences for certain felonies, for certain crimes. With respect to the parole board, and I serve on corrections with Chairman Kevin Horan and used to handle the budget for corrections on appropriations. I get from my constituency a lot of concerns, especially parents on both sides, saying my child or relative has served whatever extensive length of time and the parole board has denied this request, or how or what consideration does the parole board take when determining whether to grant a parole. And then on the opposite side, you hear from family members who say that the parole shouldn't be granted. And there has been discussions over the years, I can say, with respect to the number of paroles that the board is granting. So there was not any legislation per se to address the parole board in particular, but I can say that it's a constant discussion that's happening on High Street, just because it affects so many people across the board in different spectrums.
How does this play into the other story? The Supreme Court approved the rule change, I think it was last Thursday, it takes effect in July, that mandates criminal defendants who can't afford their own attorney must always have one before an indictment. And it was a long story, and I forgot where it was. I think in Power, Mississippi, was one of the concerns that was behind this. Some of the people who have been charged but have not been given a public defender have languished in jail for a long, long time.
They have, and I completely agree with the rule change. I think it's something that's definitely needed. In analogous, kind of segueing to another bill that we passed that deals with this, is that AOC requested, and this is a piece of legislation that Judd A. addressed and we took up on the floor in both chambers.
Stands for
Administrative Office of Courts, pardon me.
I didn't want to confuse that with a congresswoman.
Oh, no. No. Administrative Office of Courts.
Yeah.
We had a court interpreter bill that the federal government is now saying that states have to implement. And so if you are language, English proficient, if there's an improficiency with the English language in criminal cases, you now have to be afforded an interpreter. So I can see with, different rulings or holdings that are coming down from the Supreme Court, whether it's federal or state, I can see why the rule change is needed.
HB 1216 was the other bill. Can you speak to that one, the judges and chancellors? Is
1216. So this was a huge bill. for so many different reasons, there has not been an increase for the allowances for the judges and the chancellors for several years. And with inflation, et cetera, we really wanted to increase those allowances for our circuit court and chancellors. And so for rental increase, we adjusted that to $15,000. Now the overall allowance for the judges is $100,000, and we removed the limitations. So now a judge can spend that on a court reporter, for instance. And there's more leeway for the judges to determine in what areas they want to allocate that $100,000. And if you're a judge and you don't have an office, then we increase that amount to $7,000. So that was really needed.
Just like in baseball, a swing and a miss, and you wish you would have hit it, what bills would be front and center that we got to take care of next year that we didn't do this year?
We've got to do judicial redistricting.
That's true. Yeah.
That is huge. And also, at some point, I would like to see us address the ballot initiative. That's something, as you know, back in 2021, the Supreme Court said, hey, legislature, you need to take care of this. And so I'm hoping that we're able to get that done.
The initiative itself, and I didn't have this last year. This year on the C Spire text line, I've gotten more and more, and I think the influence is because of people paying attention to what's going on in California. I even think some of the people who were pro-initiative want to make sure it's tough to get something on the ballot and not surpass or bypass the House and Senate because of what they see going on in California. California is just they make it so easy to get things on the ballot that it's 16 pages long when they go vote for different initiatives that they put on that ballot. So I think we got more and more people in the state of Mississippi who are aware of that and want to be protective that we don't get to that point.
I think so. There are some of us who want to be more protective of it. And again, it's an argument that goes both ways. And it's just a matter of us, and I mean us, the legislature, kind of getting in. And there's always, you saw more momentum and movement with it this year. Each year it keeps building from 2022 session. And so hopefully we'll get there. I know it's something that the voters of the state really want. And so hopefully we'll get to that point.
Don't see any reason right now, but then again, most of the time, the rank and file, we wouldn't have any idea why you would call a special session. We would think if there is a special session, it's because of this unbelievable economic opportunity that we haven't heard about. But any rumblings that you know of?
It's been pretty quiet. There's always a rumbling of a special session, but as you know, special sessions can only be called by the governor.
Right.
And so if the governor sees fit, we'll have one.
We did some stuff in workforce development, and that was good news. Ryan was on the other day, and I think we're getting there as far as workforce development.
I think so, too. I had a really good meeting the first week after we got out of session with my president, Bishop, Dr. Bishop from Southwest Community College. We, working with MDA, we are in the Aspire program in the town of Gloucester. And so probably about maybe 2 weeks ago, we got a group of stakeholders there and met in Gloucester Town Hall. And that's one of the areas that we're really focusing on in Southwest Mississippi. You see it particularly all over the state, as you said, with the legislation that we passed. But in particular, in my neck of the woods, that's something that we're working on. And in conversations with Dr. Bishop and our team there, our Aspire team, we talked about how to build workforce. And I think you'll see that in other areas as well. You
didn't have any relatives or friends in the path of the tornado Rolling Fork in that area, did you?
I had friends who were in the area. I think even if you don't have family, I don't imagine how any Mississippian or anybody with a heart can see what happened there and
absolutely.
it just not pull at your strings.
I think we've also seen, and the nation has seen again, how people in Mississippi come together after something like that. But it's incredible.
And
it's
we're going
to
step in and help. We're going to have to step in and help them.
You got it. Angela Cockerham, ma'am, thank you so very much for coming in. Always informative.
Well,
We
thank
enjoy
you.
it.
Thank you for having me, Paul.
Good
Always
to
a
see
pleasure. You too.
All right, we got more coming up. Hang on this tax day. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a Tuesday, the 18th day of April.